I just get back on YouTube, and this is the kind of shit I'm gonna have to make a standalone video for the first time. This isn't a 9back video, this isn't a Saturday morning soapbox, this is the first standalone video I'm gonna have to do for something. And if you told me it was gonna be sports related, I figured that would be the last thing. I figured it'd be gaming, I figured it'd be anime, I figured it'd be some bullshit like that. But this, I can't fucking believe it. So for those out of the loop, at the Toronto Maple Leafs hockey game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, a post was made on Twitter that showed a video of what somebody thought was somebody on the ice, for that matter, and I am going to give you a warning because I am going to use the word. Somebody said fucking faggot on the ice. At least that was the claim. There's a lot to be said about that, even before we go any further than that, but I mean, I do want to get these simple facts out of the way before I really get into any of the meat and potatoes of things. But the gist of it is somebody thought they heard that word, and it seems to have turned out that it wasn't. In the end, though, the word, at least from the NHL's investigation on things, is that no one said the word. Specifically, Morgan Rielly did not say the word. And the word that is apparently being said as what was probably said was ragged, which is a hockey term for, if I remember correctly, has something to do with just hanging onto the puck, stick handling it, messing around with it, but not actually taking a shot. It's almost like they're killing time with the puck. So the short version is somebody thought they heard somebody say faggot on the ice, and on the flip side, it seems like nobody said the word. So there's a lot to unpack there, but I kind of want to do this in two separate parts for specific reasons. So first off, I woke up on Tuesday morning, just, getting myself ready for work, and I ended up turning on Steve Dangle's LFR, which is his Leafs fan reaction series that he does at the end of every Leafs game, and I just want to get his thoughts on the game, and he really doesn't talk about the game in that video. I'll link it in the description below so you have something to look at. But normally he spends 10 to 15 minutes talking about the game and maybe answers a couple questions at the end. This time, it was the polar opposite. He maybe talked about the game for like 3-4 minutes tops, and which is crazy because it was a frustrating game to watch. I didn't watch it live. I watched the highlights, and it was not a good game by the look of it. But for him to spend such little time watching that, or even talking about that game for that matter, that's rare. And I didn't understand why until he said, oh, by the way, and somebody apparently issued a homophobic slur in that game. And that started that whole thing. Which at first I was thrown off by. I'm thinking, who the fuck said something? And then when he said, it sounds like it was Morgan Rielly, I'm like, really? Morgan Rielly? What the fuck? By the way, this isn't implicit bias. Like, I'm not, like, implicit bias, like, I am a Leaf fan. That's fairly obvious. But, I mean, I'm not, like, the biggest Rielly fan. This is a free shirt that I got at Christmas. So it's not like, it just happens to be the only Leafs t-shirt that I own that has his name on the back. Like, this jersey doesn't even have a name on it. So he's ironically, the only player I own something of the Leafs that has a name on it, and it's his. It had to be his, because of course. But yeah, I was so thrown off by that. I'm thinking, Morgan Rielly of all people? I wouldn't have believed that. I could have seen, like, so many other guys on the roster, but I mean, I would have figured it'd be one of the younger guys, like one of the rookies that none of us have heard of. Not this level, but when I heard it was Morgan Rielly, I'm like, dude, that's fucking crazy. That can't even be right. Now, automatically, I don't play the game of, oh, well, it's a conspiracy. Somebody's making that shit up. I look at it and be like, well, if people are saying that that's what's said, like, well, shit. I mean, you can't argue that stuff. I mean, if it's on video, it's on video, right? Now, I didn't look too much further into that because, again, I had work, so I went straight to work after that. Like, I watched the video, and within, like, 5 minutes, I was out the door, so I didn't really have time to look too far into it. The second I get to work and there's a bit of a down period, we have plenty of time and I work in an office, I randomly go on Reddit just to kind of read things out, and I'm not even looking for the Rielly stuff at that point. I'm just assuming it happened, and I'll see what happens eventually if he gets, like, a suspension or something like that. But instead, I immediately see a Reddit thread that shows a guy saying what he hears is actually going on, and I will link that comment part of the Reddit section in the description as well. And that's where I started getting a different side of it, where the ragged part of that conversation came out. And that was interesting to me because I'm thinking, well, I've never heard the term before, and that's when I looked it up, saw what it meant, and then I actually had the chance to watch the video of the thing properly, and I immediately saw a few things wrong with it. I mean, for one, the volume between the two voices is so much louder in such a quick succession that it doesn't seem like it could have been the same guy. Not to mention that it doesn't sound like it's the same voice anyway. At the same time, Rielly's also looking directly at the ref, and we're assuming that he issued that slur at the ref. Well, the ref didn't react at all. And you would imagine that if Rielly had said something like that, I mean, he wasn't that far away from the ref either, he would have reacted immediately. Like, there's no way there wasn't that there. But it was one of those things where I didn't read too far into it, so I didn't know specifically what happened on the ice. I just figured the cameras or at least the microphones caught somebody yelling fucking faggot on the ice, and that was it. So, I mean, color me shocked when it comes out pretty quickly. The NHL did their investigation and said that, well, we've come to the conclusion that not only did Morgan Rielly not say anything, it seems like by all accounts nobody heard any slurs being issued. So it sounds like the whole scenario is that Morgan Rielly in frustration was saying fuck, and then somebody else was saying ragget, like quickly in succession, and it just blended together so perfectly. And I've listened to the audio from that video several times. You can make the case that somebody might have said it. I can understand that. You can absolutely make the case that those words could have been spoken. But at the end, if the NHL does their investigation, and not only does everybody from the Leafs organization, nobody from Tampa step forward, and the ref who it was directed to apparently even says, I didn't hear any slur. There was no slur. It's like, okay, well then the word didn't get spoken. The only way that it could have is if somehow a fan in the crowd was saying it and it got caught on the mics. And even then, I don't believe that, because I think that's the kind of stuff that somebody would have come forward and said, hey, like, I heard this happen and blah, blah, blah. Like, with the way that the internet works, you figure that stuff comes out. So before we get into the meat and potatoes of all this, I just want to go over two different ways of looking at this issue. The first one I want to talk about is how I would have made this video had I not heard anything beyond the slur being issued, and that was going to be it. And especially if that was the case, if the NHL came out and said that Morgan Rielly did indeed do this, and here's like his punishment if they were going to issue it right away. So right off the bat, let's look at it this way. If he had said it, is it a bad word to be saying? Of course it fucking is. Should he have gotten suspended? Yes, absolutely. I think I've seen it happen before, and it's been like a game suspension and a fine as well, something like that. But the most important question is he worth looking at all of a sudden so far below people now, like from the fans aspect, especially with some of the tweets that I've seen from like people in the LGBT community saying like, I don't know if I can look at Morgan Rielly as like, I can't be a fan of him anymore. This is where I have a little bit of a problem with things. Because look, not every time that these words get issued necessarily means that the guy is absolutely in hatred of gay people. Because I've got to be honest, I'm bisexual, but I actually use that word. And it's only in frustration, and it's never against anybody. I never say it to somebody's face. I always say it, and it's usually when I'm driving, when I'm in the car alone, because I get so frustrated. It's one of those words that like you hear so much when you're little, because I was called a fag all the time when I was a little kid in school, and I never associated it with homosexuality. Hell, I didn't even realize homosexuality was a concept until like high school, because that's how sheltered I was living out in the countryside, that sort of deal. But when I pull out that word, it's never meant to be like against a gay person, or hell, it's not even meant to be derogatory in that sense. It's just a word that I guess you hear so many times in the same way that you hear swear words over and over again. And it just comes out even though you don't have any intention to. I never have any intention to want to use that word. It's just sometimes that word comes out. In the same vein that I don't use the N-word ever because I never grew up with that word. So the fans that are automatically going around and shooting so many shots at Morgan Rielly saying, I could never be a fan of yours ever again, you are a vile, despicable human being. Let's not forget that there are a lot of words in our language that we use repeatedly or use very seldomly just because we hear them so often when we're young that it's just soaked into our brain. I'm not saying it's a good word. I'm not saying it's okay that he said the word. Let's get that major fact straight here. I'm not saying that it's okay that he used the word, because I do believe he should be suspended if he had used that word. There is nothing that ever prevents that from happening. I will always stand by the fact that that word is not one you ever say, especially on national television. But at the end of the day, can we not look at him like he's automatically a person that hates all gay people, especially because he's already somebody that actually participates in LGBT-friendly events? Like, let's not kid ourselves, the guy is one of those guys that helps. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's infallible from using those words. It's possible, and it is going to happen. It doesn't matter who, and it doesn't matter when, it doesn't matter where. There is always the potential that if you hear that word enough, especially when you're growing up and soaking in so much information, that word may come out not even on purpose. Because let's remember, Hockey is a very heated game and a very fast game, and you have time to only make a very, very split-second decision. It's very easy for someone to lose their temper for a moment in time and say a word that they do not mean. This isn't the Jose Reyes situation where he had legitimate homophobic slurs written in his eye black, where there's clear intent there. This is heat of the moment shit. I believe that even if Morgan Rielly actually did say the word, he never would have meant it to be as a gay-hating thing. It was just something heat of the moment, and it just came out. Doesn't mean he shouldn't get punished for it. He should have gotten suspended and a fine if that actually was the case that happened. But for people that are acting like they can't be a fan of him anymore, like, if that is your criteria for not being a fan of a person, then you might as well just not like sports at all, and you might as well unfriend at least half your friends on Facebook or unfollow half the people you follow on Twitter, because we've all done it. It's not a good thing to do, but we all, basically almost all of us do it, and not even on purpose. Now there's the flip side, which is now the side that we know that it never happened in the first place. At least, I mean, other than the people who think it's a conspiracy theory and the NHL's treating it differently. And I'll get to that in a minute when I look at a couple of tweets that I've seen just before I started making this video. But I mean, oh my God. Does this not prove that we need to stop this bullshit of immediately just shooting an automatic response that must be what happened? You know, it's great that I actually don't wake up in the morning and figure, okay, well, I got 20 minutes. I'll quickly record audio just to get something out there. No, I took it with me and went to work with it and kind of fought with it a little bit in my head on my way to work. And then obviously that's when I read the thing about, you know, oh, somebody must have actually said ragged, not, you know, the slur. And then on top of that, we get the news that the NHL said nothing happened and all that stuff. I'm so glad that I actually took the time to not react to it. I didn't make a tweet about it, didn't make a Facebook post about it, didn't say a word about it until I got to work and saw a little bit more about it and kind of formulated my own decision from there. I always plan on making the video. It was just a hell of a lot different now than it was going to be when I was leaving after hearing just the initial responses to it. But again, I've said this on the soapbox, I've said this in other videos, I've said this in articles I've written. We need to stop taking the extreme positions on everything, and we need to stop reacting immediately to anything we read. You know, it's at the point that so many stories that I see online, I don't react to immediately because I know that maybe I'm misinterpreting something, I may be missing information. There's so much stuff that can happen, and if you read a headline or a tweet, you can easily make assumptions so fast, and for me, I would rather not go and jump to conclusions immediately and wait for things to smooth over a little bit, and this is why it worked in this specific video. I can't imagine what my video would have looked like had I reacted with the little bit of information that I actually knew. So for the people that reacted so quickly, should this not teach you a little bit of a lesson here? I'm not saying that you shouldn't be worried that somebody would be using a slur like that, because under no circumstance should anybody be using that word. I think we all know that. But the reality is we can't just assume that because we thought we heard it means it automatically happens. And in this case, we saw that that was exactly what happened. We thought we heard something and there was nothing there. And I mean, if you want to play the conspiracy game, you can do that. But I can't even fathom the energy of being like, no, he must have said it and the NHL's hiding that. Like, that's just crazy. So I want to talk about a couple of tweets that I've seen, and this is not like, I'm not taking tweets from that night, I'm not taking tweets from this morning, I'm taking tweets from literally, like, I'm recording this at 9 o'clock, this is stuff that happened in the last, like, couple of hours. So I just want to go through a couple of things here and see what we can find here. So this guy posts, so a lot of people want to apologize to Morgan Rielly. As a straight white man, I'm not quick to assume the worst in a situation because I'm privileged. No one else has it easy and are entitled to fear the worst because it's the norm for them. Stop asking for their apologies. I mean, right off the bat, I'm tired of this, I'm a straight white man, so I can't assume anything because I'm privileged. Can we stop with the privilege debate? I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but please, can we stop doing that? We all are allowed to have an opinion, and we're all having an equal opinion. It does not matter whether you're straight, you still can have an opinion on this sort of thing, because I think we're all mature enough to know that that's something that shouldn't have been said. And in this case, it's something that was not said, and then people are now sitting there with egg on their face. They should be apologizing to Morgan Rielly because they were trying to ruin this guy's career in some cases, and some were trying to pretend that like he was so much more so much more evil and so much worse than he actually is, just because he might have accidentally let a word slip out. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and demand that people apologize for the stuff that they tweet about Morgan Rielly, but for God's sakes, at least admit that you were wrong. That's the key thing here. Admit that you fucked up. Admit that you jumped the gun a little bit. That's all. That's all we're asking. Well, and this guy says here, if Morgan Rielly wasn't a beloved Leaf and a fan favorite, this would be a different outcome. Imagine the headlines if it was a Sens or a Habs player. And he talks about some other stuff that I have no idea what he's talking about. Well, let's be honest here. If this was a player that was on the Habs or the Sens, it would get less coverage, especially by the Toronto media where it's at its max. But it would still get treated in the same way. People would react the same way that they would react. It just depends. It would maybe be a different fan base. Like if this is a Sens or a Habs player, I don't think Leafs fans jump on this as much. But this becomes a bigger story because it is arguably the biggest market in hockey. So it does. And the fact is, quite frankly, that if this would happen to a team like, say, the Arizona Coyotes, this doesn't make it up the chain at all. Like this is a very small-time story in comparison. But because it's the Toronto Maple Leafs, it becomes a bigger deal. So I don't like the idea that this guy's trying to say that there'd be a different outcome, though, that because he was a Leafs player. Like, this guy got special treatment because of the Leafs. No. If there was sufficient proof that the guy did it, and again, we're talking from the referees. I mean, a lot of people that were at the game don't remember hearing it. And I mean, come on. If you're a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning and you may have to worry about playing Toronto, you want to get this guy to have so much in his head. You want somebody to step up and say, yeah, he did it. So that way he has to have that go on. Like if the Leafs actually beat the Bruins, because we're going to assume that that's who they're playing in the first round, and they win, and they have to go face Tampa, do you not think that the Tampa media is going to talk about the last time that these guys played, that Morgan Rielly issued that slur, and they're going to get into his fucking head? And if that's their top D-man, and he's got a little bit of a problem now in his head where he's got to be careful about what he says, not to mention what he does on the ice, he might actually play worse. So somebody would have said something if he actually did do it. And the fact that nobody's come out and still hasn't come out tells me that nothing fucking happened. So it tells me that the outcome would not have been different, because if nobody said it, that would have been the outcome that we saw. And then there's this guy who does two tweets that I really had to go in. So the first one is, by the way, people who jumped at Morgan Rielly have nothing to apologize for. Those who zone in on and counteract against perceived homophobia are showing that there's no place for that behavior, and that message is why the league acted so fast to investigate in the first place. Again, I may not say they have to apologize, but they definitely need to say, hey, I overreacted, or hey, I jumped the gun, or hey, I was wrong. But the idea that this is the thing that's been driving me nuts, though, about a lot of the reaction to the story, is that there's been a lot of tweets of people saying, hey, this is still an issue, and hey, this is something that we need to look at. Sure, but this is not the story we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who made a viral tweet that almost got somebody in a lot of hot water for doing something he never did. This has nothing to do with what this guy's saying for, it's people are trying to like walk away from the fact that they said something wrong, and trying to be like, well, we should still look at homophobia in sports and in hockey and all that stuff. And people are also trying to play the game of, oh, well, maybe we should react by, donating money to charity, which, good, but let's not try to hide the fact that a lot of us jumped the fucking gun here. And by the way, the league acting so fast to investigate in the first place has something to do with that there's no place for that behavior. And I imagine that the league acts pretty fast for any situation like this. If it was like somebody saying something really cruel to a fan in the crowd, or somebody punching a referee, like, come on, guys. They will always act fast to investigate things that are serious. And the fact that it's a homophobic slur potentially has almost nothing to do with it. And then the other tweet here is after somebody was talking about how, one of his tweets didn't age too well after the whole news story came out. And this guy reacts again as well, where he's like, oh no, it turns out Morgan Rielly isn't a homophobe. This is such a bad ending and I'm bitter because I'm wrong. Is that what you want to hear? Maybe work on creating a culture where it isn't believable for guys to say stuff like that and people won't jump to reasonable conclusions. And I'll just simply say the most blatant thing, which is that this occurs on every side for everything now. This is not a specific thing to homophobia in sports. This is not even a thing to homophobia. Let's be completely honest here. This is a problem with everyone in every single thing, because every story now has people jumping the gun. Every story has people overreacting and reaching for things that aren't there. This has nothing to do with gay slurs. This has nothing to do with racial slurs. This has nothing to do with anything specifically. This is all of it. This is everything because of the way that the last 5 years specifically in our political climate has changed. Because we now live in a society where people will immediately just assume the worst in every situation. And this goes on both the left and the right as well. And I see that on both sides. The Morgan Rielly thing shows that. And at the same vein, the right will immediately jump on things too if somebody says something they don't like and assume that it automatically means the worst possible thing. At the end of the day, folks, we are all sitting here with egg on our face because none of us can take a moment to stop, think, and react after we get all the information. But instead, we are a reactionary culture. And because of that, we have stories like this. This is not a specific subject anymore. This is a full circle problem. This has nothing to do with just homophobia, and it certainly has nothing to do with just homophobia in sports. This is everything. So let's not kid ourselves by saying that this was something that just happens because of a situation that we think is so prevalent now. You know, if there's one thing I've noticed in the last year, especially because I paid attention to so many different stories from so many different sides of the equation, is that when people are wrong, or proven wrong for that matter, they have a tendency of trying to dodge, and they also have a tendency of trying to talk about a bigger issue in order to, I guess, dance away from the fact that they said something they shouldn't have, or honestly, that they were just plain old wrong. You know, I'm not going to tell you that homophobia doesn't exist. I'm not going to tell you the homophobia doesn't exist in hockey. I'm certainly not going to tell you the homophobia doesn't exist in the NHL. But in this specific case, homophobia was not going on in this hockey game. Morgan Rielly did not say a homophobic slur. That's the core of the story here. If you want to talk about homophobia in hockey, do that in its own separate video. Do that in its own separate tweet. Don't take the Morgan Rielly case and say, well, actually, we should talk about this. We should always be talking about this, but you have to admit that you were wrong. You have to admit that this was a situation that was done in poor judgment, and this was in a situation that a lot of people took in poor response. I think at the end of the day, we can all come together and say that people shouldn't be judged, period. Doesn't even matter if we're talking about sexual orientation. But we got to remember at the same time that, you know, sometimes people make mistakes. And this would have gone both ways. If Morgan Rielly had said the slur, I fully believe that he never would have meant it as an actual homophobic slur. It's just a word that people have used when they're frustrated. It's like, even look at what Bill Burr has said about that. We're like, and hell, it even has to do with the hockey thing. He, at one point, got knocked down on the ice when he was playing like beer league hockey, and a guy came up to him and said, hey, are you okay? And I think it was probably the guy that hit him. And Bill was like, nah, get away from me, you faggot. Like, again, not saying the word's okay, but let's be honest here that word is still a word that gets used in passing, not even usually on purpose. And the fact that a lot of people just automatically assume that Morgan Rielly not only said it, but meant it in the most derogatory way possible shows that we are, like I said earlier, with the fact that we're overreacting and reacting too soon, it shows that we are not in a very good place as a society right now. And I think that's twofold. Again, we want to pretend that this is just on one side of the equation. No, it's both. It really is both. Because if it was just one side, it'd be pretty easy to take the other one out, wouldn't it? But it's both ways now. On one side, you got people saying terrible, terrible things. The ones who actually call people faggots and mean that. And those are the people that causes the problem. But you have people on the other side that are taking even the most vague things in passing, things that mean nothing, and taking them like they mean the worst things possible. And it goes both ways. It fucks both sides up now. And the people directly in the middle don't know what to do with it anymore. It's just now we're reacting more in the way of, oh, well, we must think this guy must be the worst thing. Like, we automatically take the evil approach first now. Because apparently we've gotten to a point now where we are not willing to wait until all the facts come out now. We just hear that somebody might have said something, and we figure, must have said it. We hear that somebody might have committed a crime, we're thinking, oh yeah, he did it. I think we've seen in the last couple of months alone, with examples like Covington, with Jussie Smollett's, and other examples like that, that we can't automatically believe the story the second we hear it. I'm not saying that we shouldn't believe things, or at least take into mind. Because again, when I first heard that somebody had said a homophobic slur at that hockey game, and it might have been Morgan Rielly, I sat there and saying, okay, there's a very distinct possibility that he said it because enough people are clenching onto this. And it's being reported, so something has to be there. But I want to wait until I get other sides from things. Because again, we hadn't heard any comments from the Leafs. We hadn't heard an official comment from the NHL yet, other than the fact that they were investigating. When I see things like that, my brain is not to go, he must have said it. My brain is like, okay, there's a very good chance he said it. Let's wait and see if it's actually proven that he did. And if he did, then this video is entirely different. This video ends up being about that he should be suspended and will be suspended. But the video would have also been about, hey, now we need to go and find out if he actually means it or if it was just a word he used in passing. Because again, I think these are two different scenarios here. Because if he actually meant the I keep saying racial slur. If he actually meant the homophobic slur, then we have another video to make on top of that, because now we have a real issue to talk about here. But he didn't. And I don't think even if he had said the slur, he meant it as a homophobic slur. He was just saying it as a word that we as kids used to hear all the time in school play. And it was never meant to be anything homophobic. But in reality, now we know that nothing was said. And I don't give a shit about these weird conspiracy theory things going on. Like, for fuck's sakes, guys, this is the NHL. This isn't like the CIA, FBI level shit. Like, come on, relax a little bit. But we now know that nothing happened. Which means that there's no story. Which means that anybody who thought there was needs to admit they were wrong. There's a reason that I didn't say anything about this until I got the facts. Is because now I don't have to do the thing that a lot of all these people should be doing, which is saying, hey, I overreacted, or hey, I misinterpreted things, or hey, I misjudged him. I don't have to do that because I took a moment to let the story play out first. If you are the kind of person that needs to react immediately, I'm wondering one of two things. One, you've drank the Kool-Aid a little too much, or two, you're looking for that internet attention. I don't do this shit because I want to get thousands and thousands and thousands of views. I do this stuff because it's fun to me. And this story frustrated me so much that I had to do something about it. I don't like making videos like this. I don't like having to get upset like this. But this is stuff I do because I love hockey. I love making videos as a hobby to me to do. And this was a great way to vent. And because of stuff like this, it goes back to what I said earlier, where I'm so tired of watching people on any side of the political spectrum going out there and just assuming stories that are not proven yet. Stop, listen, fact check, and then wait. Until we have official confirmation of things, maybe don't jump the gun so soon. You're allowed to say, hey, it sounds like he might have said something. If that's the case, he needs to be suspended, and we need to go look further into this. But until then, innocent until proven guilty. That's how our system is supposed to work, and please adhere to that when you can. Do not get yourself so emotionally wrapped up into all these things, because that's how stuff like this happens. So that's all I'm going to have to say on that subject. I mean, it's so funny because I wanted to do so many different things. When I left this morning, I was going to make a video. When I started seeing the information, I'm like, okay, I'll probably end up writing just a post on the blog because it's easier just to be like, okay, can we just relax a bit? And then I started seeing all the tweets of people like not just plain refusing to admit they were wrong, that I'm just like, you know what? I need to go further with this. We need to actually like go beyond that and just go ham on this and really talk this out. So I want to know what you guys think about it, to like the few people that actually watch this video, but put it in the comments below. You can also hit me up on Twitter at askcsradical. I mean, if you like content like this, I'm trying not to be this depressing all the time, and it probably won't be as sports oriented. I don't do these very often. I'm a gaming and anime guy. That's my priority here. But I mean, if you're interested in the kind of stuff, give it a like, give it a subscribe if you want to see some more stuff, and we'll see how that goes from there. So other than that, I'm just happy that this story is hopefully over now, and we can move back on to being depressed that the Leafs might lose in the first round again. Because, Boston. We'll see what happens. But until then, I'll see you the next time that something stupid like this happens.